Now you're listening to Fantastic Formosa with John Abrams in Taipei. Welcome to another episode of Fantastic Formosa. I'm John Abrams, and once again, we have invited back Ross Feingold, a lawyer, and he works and lives here in Taiwan, and he has a variety of experiences dealing with the legal system. And one of the things that we find in Taiwan, like they do in Japan and Korea, are a lot of Westerners from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, UK that come here to teach English, and some of them are bad apples. And the Taiwanese are so friendly and nice, they don't always see that sort of bad actor. That people can be bad. So today it's much easier to deal with them. But in the past, we didn't have the sort of computer networks with immigration around the world that could catch them earlier. So Ross, we don't want to scare our audience completely, but so when you meet somebody, let's say in a pub or somewhere, he's Western, he's teaching English, and you know, if you have a college degree, you can teach here, get a working permit, and normally you can get health insurance, and you don't make a lot of money, but you normally make enough to survive. So in Hong Kong, when I lived there, we had a phrase called filth. Filth means dirty in English, but filth is really dirty, okay? But that's not what we're talking about. When I first heard the word in Wan Chai, I said, that's strange. Why are you calling this guy filth? He seems like a nice British guy with a suit and tie. And they said, no, you don't get it. It's an acronym. Failed in London, try Hong Kong. Back then, you could work there without a working permit if you were British. So I thought, wow, that's very strange. And they would say, no, he's a con artist or somebody running away from his problems in Britain, maybe a bad divorce, marriage, or whatever, and running away from legal problems, lawsuits, bankruptcies. So he's going to try to restart his career in Hong Kong. That's a very common problem back in the day before 97 when they turned over Hong Kong to the Chinese government. But we have the same problem in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan as well. We have folks that are running away from a bad marriage, running away from bankruptcy and child support, and maybe a little bit of criminal activity. We don't know. But, Ross, people sometimes call you. Some of these foreigners call you, Americans, British, whatever, and they're in trouble. They're in jail or whatever, and they might ask you, can you help me?
Well, thanks for that introduction, John. One of the problems with being a lawyer, somebody who has legal training, is you're always a lawyer. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just like being a doctor. You're always a doctor. If a doctor's in a restaurant and somebody starts choking and people say, is there a doctor here? Then the doctor has to raise their hand. And it's the same with being a lawyer. So people, when they find out you're a lawyer, very often they'll bring up their own experience with the legal system, possibly a criminal matter that they were involved in or some kind of contractual dispute that they were involved in. You mentioned divorce. Some people will bring that up. But when you're a lawyer, people are always bringing up their own personal experience with the law. And very often they have questions. And being a foreigner who's a lawyer, very often in Taiwan, people want to ask me questions about the legal system. The first thing I would say, John, when it comes to foreigners in Taiwan's legal system is, I'll say the obvious. Stay away from it. Don't get in trouble with the law. Then you won't need to ask a lawyer any questions. I know that sounds like common sense, but you'd be surprised how many people think they could take the risk of breaking the law, and then they'll ask for help. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, somebody contacted me. They were accused of stealing something from Airbnb where they had stayed in Taiwan.
What did they steal? Pillow?
That's a good one. Money, actually, from the because they were staying with the landlord.
Oh, okay.
And the landlord said some money was stolen. So I asked the person. I immediately asked the person. Because the police were already doing an investigation and they couldn't leave Taiwan. There was a travel ban on them until the investigation and potentially criminal charges and a trial ran its course. So they called me up. They explained that they're under investigation and they can't leave Taiwan. So I asked the obvious question. I asked, well, did you do it?
Of course.
They said, yes, I did.
Well, then what can I do for you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, what could I do? What could I do for you? I could introduce you to a Taiwan criminal lawyer, and they're probably going to tell you to plead guilty and make restitution.
Sure.
They tell you the obvious. But very often, restitution, in all seriousness, very often that's a key part of the criminal legal process here in Taiwan. If you've done something wrong, if you've broken the law and there's a victim, and unfortunately people do stupid things and sometimes happens, bar fights seems to be a common one for foreigners, unfortunately.
Yeah, it really is, actually.
And in which case there might be a victim. Or there's somebody who has sustained an injury because somebody got drunk and carried out a physical assault. Restitution. The judge,
medical bills, maybe.
The judge will look, and the prosecutors will look very kindly on restitution. So it certainly is recommended that people pay restitution when they've injured someone, or they've broken or damaged the belongings of another person. Right. If you pay restitution in compensation, then it does go a long way to making the process speedier and reducing the severity of the criminal charges. But that raises another point, where the person said, I have a travel ban. If you're a foreigner and you get into legal trouble in Taiwan, it's very possible that there'd be a travel ban and you won't be able to leave. So don't think that you could commit a crime and run to the airport. Now, there are plenty of examples and some prominent cases in the past where foreigners did commit a crime and they did make a plan to race to the airport, and they actually got out. There was a famous case where a UK national was accused of killing someone while he was drunk driving. He was drunk driving, he was accused of drunk driving.
Very famous case, actually.
And he went to the airport with a friend's passport.
Right.
And he had pasted it in his own photo.
No kidding. Oh, my God.
But it was actually a friend's passport, and he was able to get through. Now, maybe today with better computer systems, this wouldn't happen. But this
they was have fingerprints
20
now
years
that you
ago.
have to put up.
Right.
Yeah, that would be impossible.
So he was able to escape, and then Taiwan wanted the UK to send him back, and there was no extradition treaty, and it went through the courts for a very long time. And one of his arguments, the accused, one of his arguments was that the Taiwan jails are below European standards, so it would be a violation of his human rights to go back to Taiwan and have to do jail time in Taiwan for the drunk driving charge and the manslaughter charge. And he was able to defeat being sent back to Taiwan, even though the prosecutors wanted to put him in a big net and throw him on an airplane and send him back to Taiwan.
Right.
Even though there was no extradition treaty.
There was public outrage, if I remember.
Oh, of course, because he had been found guilty of these crimes.
But the man he had accidentally killed was just a father trying to support his family.
He was a very modest guy, working in, I think, as a newspaper delivery man early in the morning. So there could be a travel ban. People try to find ways to get around it. Or, again, if you bought your plane ticket for tonight, but you commit the crime in the afternoon and you race to the airport, there might not be enough time to impose a travel ban. I mean, of course, I don't recommend running away if you've committed a crime, and I don't recommend committing a crime either. So very often there is a travel ban, and for some of those cases, the process could go on for a very, very long time. I knew one foreign individual a few years ago. He was accused of a sexual assault, and there was a travel ban while the prosecutor investigated the case. And it went on for many, many, many months, and the guy couldn't leave Taiwan. And he was saying, well, why is this taking so long? And had to explain to him that the prosecutor will move at his or her own pace. And they're not going to accelerate the speed of the investigation simply because you're a foreigner and you want to leave Taiwan. And you have to understand that the prosecutor has many, many cases on their desk.
Sure.
Their desk is probably full of case files, and they're going to go through them at their own speed. And you calling the prosecutor or asking your lawyer to call the prosecutor and try to put pressure on the prosecutor to accelerate the pace of the case is not going to help. Right. In fact, you're just going to make the prosecutor grouchy.
Yeah.
And,
oh my God.
They're going to go even slower. They'll put your file on the bottom of the pile. They don't care that you want to leave. And this individual, he didn't live in Taiwan.
Right.
You know, he had visited Taiwan as a tourist. He was accused of sexually assaulting a young lady. So he wanted to leave. He wanted to go home.
All right.
But he couldn't leave while the case was being investigated. And that case was disposed of by paying restitution.
Right.
So it was another example of how restitution could sort of make, it could accelerate the process. It could reduce the severity of the charges depending what the charges are. This one was and I don't mean to look down upon the victim's allegations, not at all. But for the prosecutor, this was what we would call in English a he said, she said. Right? The guy was saying it was consensual, and the girl was saying it was not. And that's why he was being investigated for sexual assault. But when he paid her some restitution to make this go away, that's actually the way the prosecutor said, well, it's he said, she said, and he paid some compensation to the victim. So I'm going to tie it up here. I'm going to end the case. And the accused finally got his passport back, and he was able to depart Taiwan. But it was many, many months, and there was nothing he could do about it, right?
He had to get a job or something, part-time or something?
No, he was not entitled to a work permit just because he was being investigated for a crime. So he was just stuck here.
Oh, my God.
And no, he didn't have work rights.
All right.
And who would hire him anyway? He's facing a criminal charge.
Pictures on the TV a lot.
No, it wasn't on TV. But,
it was never? Okay.
But that is something for foreigners to keep in mind when they commit a crime. Another common one that comes up is, unfortunately, drug use, and specifically marijuana, because nowadays a lot of countries have decriminalized marijuana, so it's legal to use it. But Taiwan, it is still illegal.
Right.
Growing it, using it, possessing it, they're all illegal here in Taiwan. And in fact, Taiwan, what a lot of people don't realize, like some other countries, Taiwan could pull you out of the line at the airport and make you take a drug test.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's not usually how people get caught. I mean, usually people get caught when they're at a dance club or a bar.
Sure. They raid the place.
And the police come in and they could take everybody out and make them do a drug test as well. They could take everyone to the police station and make them take a drug test. That's when people get caught. Or a friend gets caught and then they rat out. They become a informer and they inform on their friends. The rat, yeah. They inform on their friends who are in possession of drugs, including marijuana. Very often, the way those cases will be disposed of, assuming you're just using it and you're in possession of it, but you're not the sales network. You're not growing it. You don't have a whole farmhouse of marijuana plants.
No.
But just for the possession or use, they can make you go to a drug rehab center for a few weeks, and that'll be how your case
in Chinese.
In Chinese. That'll be how your case will get disposed of.
Like what?
And also, keep in mind though, for foreigners, and I'm talking to foreigners specifically. Not only will this keep you stuck in Taiwan for a while this case gets disposed of, if you're applying for a job or graduate school or anything, security clearance in another country, anything where they might ask you, have you been arrested?
And they can punch that up on Interpol, right?
Well, Taiwan's not part of Interpol, so.
Well, they have an office here.
No Interpol office.
They have a liaison.
They might.
I've been there actually. But whatever.
But Taiwan's not a member, so you will be faced with the challenge of answering that question honestly, right? So if you're asked in any kind of application, job application, school application, security clearance application, if you've been arrested in Taiwan, you're taking a risk by lying about it, right? So once you've had a brush with the law, then you do have an obligation for basically the rest of your life to say that I really did have I was arrested in Taiwan, and people can say, what were you arrested for? And you'll have an obligation to tell the truth. So the best thing, of course, is not to get arrested. Don't take the risk, but don't think just because you did it in Taiwan that you'll get away with it. So there's a risk there. When you become a permanent resident of Taiwan, you have to get something called a police record.
Right.
And being arrested even for marijuana use might come up.
Oh my God.
And it might delay your permanent resident application as well. So these things are not simple. They do have long-term ramifications. So I would discourage people from thinking it's not a big deal. I had another interesting case a few years ago where an individual had a Taiwan business partner. They were trying to launch a new business. It involved manufacturing a product here in Taiwan and selling it overseas. And as often is the case, they had a falling out. And during the course of operating what at the time was still a very small business, they had used a cloud service like a Google Docs or something similar to store some of their information for their company. And after the foreign individual had a falling out with their Taiwan business partner, the foreign individual accessed their cloud, their shared cloud account, to obtain some information about their business because this foreign individual wanted to continue the business on their own.
Right.
And the Taiwan individual went to the prosecutors and accused the foreign individual of committing basically like a theft of trade secrets, which could be criminal.
Okay.
And they brought this to the prosecutors, and the prosecutors initiated an investigation. And it went on for many, many months. Now, unfortunately, there was no travel ban on the foreign individual. So during the course of the investigation, they left and returned. They lived in Taiwan. Their life was in Taiwan, so they weren't going to run away from Taiwan. But of course, they were very worried that the prosecutor might bring charges. And the specific, here's the interesting part, or one of the interesting parts about this case, the information that he was accused of accessing was actually the price quotes from the manufacturer. So the manufacturer said, I'll charge you $10 per piece, minimum order of 5,000 pieces, whatever it was. So it was just scans of the fee quotes from manufacturers. And his former Taiwan business partner accused our client of stealing this. This was trade secret theft. But our position was anyone could call up the factory
anybody
and get this fee quote. And the factory owner would give the same fee quote to anyone. They give the same price quote to anyone. There was nothing inherently secret about this, but because it was in a cloud that required a password to access, the business partner accused our client as a foreign individual of having committed a crime. And again, it took months until the prosecutor closed the case. Ultimately, the prosecutor realized that there was no case here because the information was not inherently secret, and our client had legitimate access to that information. and they didn't sign any paperwork saying that he wouldn't access the information when the partnership dissolved. So it went on a long time, and our client had to pay money, had to pay lawyers money. So it cost him time and it cost him money for something that ultimately the prosecutor decided was not a case. We think that maybe the Taiwan business partner was hoping they would get some money.
Right. Okay.
That our client would cave in and say, all right, I'll give you a bunch of money for you to go away and for you to withdraw the criminal charge.
Sure.
And our client didn't want to offer their former business partner any money.
Right.
They felt they didn't do anything wrong. And as his lawyer, we agreed with him. We didn't think he did anything wrong. And we thought there was this element where the Taiwan partner was trying to scare our client because our client was a foreigner. But our client decided that they did the right thing. They paid a lawyer.
Yeah.
Right? So
you see this everywhere, though, in America, Asia.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for somebody to do that.
But I'll tell you, this case brings up another issue that I see a lot with foreigners who go into business with a Taiwan partner, and then there's some kind of dispute. And we'll ask the foreign partner, show us the paperwork related to the company. And the foreign partner will say, well, my Taiwan partner has all the paperwork. I never got it.
Okay.
Well, why didn't you ask for a copy of the paperwork?
Sure, that's
and they'll say, well,
yeah.
I trusted my partner at the time. But yeah, common sense says if you're entering into a partnership with anyone, but especially if you're entering into a partnership in a foreign country,
sure, absolutely,
with a foreign partner who's a native of that country,
and you don't speak the language,
or you don't read it, or you don't read it at a business level.
No.
A lot of people can speak or read a little bit of Chinese, but maybe they don't read it at a level of business documents.
Right.
I'm talking about the incorporation documents, the articles of incorporation, the filings with the relevant regulatory agencies here. So one important thing to keep in mind, and Taiwan's a good place to do business. And
it is.
We know lots of foreigners, John and I know lots of foreigners who've opened businesses here in Taiwan, and some of them have become very successful.
Oh my gosh.
But
yes.
If you have a Taiwan partner, you got to make sure you have in your hands.
You should have a lawyer too.
And you should have your own lawyer. A lot of people go to an accountant. A lot of people go to an accountant to form a business. As a lawyer, I'm biased. I think you should go to a lawyer, not go to an accountant, because very often accountants, they'll use the off-the-shelf documents. And the difference between an accountant and a lawyer when you're forming a company, and I hope the accountants in the audience don't get mad at me, but a lawyer will be a strategist. So if there needs to be any unique changes to the articles of incorporation, and that involves drafting, I think you should go to a lawyer for that, not to an accountant, because the accountant just wants to take documents off the shelf and just file them. So
templates, basically.
Basically, the accountants will use the template documents, and again, I hope accountants don't get mad at me. But especially if you're a foreigner and you're starting to do business here in Taiwan, as you said, there's language issues as well. I think the more prudent thing is to go to a lawyer and make sure you get a copy at the time of all the documentation, because I've seen that so many times when somebody comes to me and they're having a dispute and they don't have in their hands copies of the company formation documents, and they'll tell us a story, like, well, I'm supposed to own 51.7% of the company, and there's a whole bunch of other people, Taiwanese people, who own the rest of the company, and the documents don't say that. I've seen that. Unfortunately, I've seen that many, many times. And you say, well, did you know that the documents don't say that? Well, I trusted my partner. And then they're really,
you do that,
they're really
anywhere
stuck,
in the world,
because it's going to add to the cost of fighting this out.
Sure.
And it's going to take longer, and everybody suffers, right? Nobody is happy at the end of these situations. I mean, the lawyers are happy because they make a little bit of money, but the business person will have a very bad experience. So anyone thinking of doing business, again, I recommend going to a lawyer for the formation, and I also recommend getting copies, even if it's in Mandarin. At least get copies at the time. You don't want to try and be scrambling to get those formation documents after a dispute has arisen.
Right.
Speaking of language issues, if you're involved in a criminal case, if you're accused of a crime, you are entitled to a translator. However,
Okay.
I should caution that I've had a number of clients who have shared some pretty bad stories about the translating capabilities. So
make sure it's a damn good translator.
correct. So when people are being interrogated and they're accused of a crime, the translator might be provided by the police or the prosecutors. And they might not be very good. The quality really could vary.
Yeah, sure. And what about the local so-called de facto embassies like AIT and the British Council?
That's a great question. There's a lot of misconception about what they could do for foreigners when foreigners have been arrested. Basically, all they can do is provide you a list of lawyers without making a recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
So they could give you a list of English-speaking lawyers. And the other thing they could do is make sure, to the best of their ability, that you are not being treated any worse than a local person would be treated.
Right.
That is all they could do. They cannot get you better treatment. They cannot get you a 5-star jail. They cannot get you better food in the jail. Okay? All they could do is check that you.
I want an American jail.
Right? And you're not being treated better. All they can do is check that you're not being treated worse.
I've been told the prisons and jails here are not so bad.
I don't know, maybe the police told you that, or a prosecutor told you that.
Well, I don't know. There's been some strange foreigners here. There was a foreigner that came to Taiwan from Britain, I think, and he's got some issues, mental, and he tattooed his forehead, "I love Taiwan." And,
well, he must really love Taiwan.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the video or photographs of this guy, and he's very violent, actually, and dangerous. But they still have not expelled him from the country.
Taiwan's a very forgiving place, apparently.
Yes, he married a local, and that protected him. Is that an issue as well?
Well, yeah, I think it'd be very difficult for the authorities to expel the spouse of a local citizen, and then you get into very complex human rights questions. If she divorces him, then I guess he's out of here.
I've never met him, but I've heard so much about him, and he is dangerous. There's no question about it. There's in the old days when I first got here, there were far more crazy foreigners here than there used to be, or there are now at least.
But again, the jail conditions in Taiwan. It's not like the European jail where you get an Xbox. Okay.
They give them Xboxes?
Yeah, apparently.
No way.
Some jails in Europe where you live in like a little condominium on the grounds of the prison, and you could walk around. Taiwan jails are not nice places.
All right. Okay. But they're not as bad as the Southeast Asian prisons I hear about.
I would say it's comparable.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right. But you're fed.
You're fed.
Yeah. I mean,
and if you're Muslim and you want a halal meal, or if you're Jewish and you want a kosher meal, you could demand that.
Right.
And if they believe that you really are kosher, they will arrange for you to get a kosher meal.
Outstanding.
But generally speaking, the prisons are not nice, and you don't want to be thrown in one. So again,
nobody wants to be thrown in any prison.
Stay on the right side of the law. But if you are being interrogated or you're being questioned by the prosecutors, you really should make sure you have a good a good translator. And often, and I'm sorry to say this, but often the ones provided by the system are not that good. So you should try to get your own translator, which is going to cost money, but you should talk to your lawyer. You should demand to have a lawyer present. You're supposed to have a lawyer present when you're interrogated as a suspect.
Okay.
So demand to have a lawyer. And as I said earlier, the de facto embassies, they could give you a list of English-speaking lawyers, but they cannot recommend a lawyer. If you ask them, is the first name on the list a good lawyer, they cannot say, yes, he or she is a good lawyer. They simply cannot do that for you. All they could do is give you a list, and then you or your friends on the outside of jail can start making phone calls and try and hire a lawyer. And also keep in mind, lawyers are going to want a down payment. So this is another issue that comes up with foreigners, especially if they're just a short-term visitor. A lawyer wants a down payment.
Definitely.
We call that a retainer.
Right.
And people who are here on a short visit and they get in trouble with the law, they don't have 100,000 Taiwan dollars with them. right? So you got to figure out how to pay the lawyer. But yes, lawyers need to get paid, and for those kinds of criminal cases, they're going to want to be paid up front, frankly.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're afraid that they won't be paid.
Exactly. So you got to pay the lawyers, and these are one of those little things that people don't think of when they get a little stupid and they break the law.
Right. How many of these foreigners get arrested for crimes that are based on passion, like bar fight or a love affair gone bad, or just ordinary marijuana use because they're used to it in Europe and America?
I don't recall the data points, but in talking with friends in the police force, those are the typical cases.
Bar fights.
He said, she said situations with females. Business disputes, though, as I mentioned, business disputes could be another source of criminal charges. So you have to be very careful when getting into business arrangements.
So you get a lot of phone calls from foreigners in jail that heard your name or
You'd be surprised how many foreigners get in trouble here. Really, and they need legal help. It's unfortunate, but it's true that a lot of foreigners do get into legal trouble. And then, as we were discussing, there are some serious cases as well. The manslaughter case involving the drunk driver. A few years ago, there was a foreigner accused of slashing to death somebody he was in the drugs business with.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's a very that one's a very serious charge. And frankly, for that kind of case, the lawyers are going to want tens of thousands of U.S. dollars in upfront payment as a retainer, because those cases could go on for several years, and it could be very expensive. If you want to hire the right lawyer, if you want to hire a lawyer who barely speaks English, I don't know how you're going to communicate with them, but you'll get them for a lot less money.
Right. I remember the slashing case was near my home, and the person who was killed was a neighbor.
Canadian, I believe.
Yeah.
The victim was Canadian.
And they were all foreigners, actually.
Yes.
And everybody in Taiwan was in complete shock as to... And I thought, the brutality of the death over marijuana of all things was silly. I thought, what?
Yeah, but they were sellers, right? So it did involve large quantities. It wasn't over, one cigarette.
But what were they thinking? I mean, my God. Yeah. They did it in a public place.
And also brings up another point. Taiwan still has the death penalty. Although it's used very, very rarely. And frankly, I don't think they would execute a foreigner because it would create issues with that foreigner's country's government. Whereas there are countries in Asia that do execute foreigners. China, Singapore, to name two. They do execute foreigners if the case and the judgment and this jail sentence warrants it. Again, I don't think Taiwan would execute a foreigner, but they have the death penalty here. Under the current government, it hasn't been used very often.
No.
Because the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, their position is anti-death penalty. But it could change in the future. There could be a president more willing to use the death penalty.
It's a democracy. Yeah.
There you go.
Never know. And I know Taiwan's really big on human rights. They really push the envelope.
But again, that I think won't help you once you're inside. Once you're in prison, the conditions are not very nice.
Right.
And I don't think you're going to get much help from the human rights groups. So you'll get a visit periodically from your de facto embassy.
Right.
But again, I have to emphasize this again. All they could do is make sure that the conditions under which you're held in prison are not worse than the conditions of a Taiwan person.
Sure. Okay. How many prisons are there in Taiwan?
Well, the foreigners are usually all sent to one prison for foreigners. So,
do you know which one it is?
I think it's in New Taipei, but usually you'll be inside with typically with other foreign inmates.
So keep them all together. You can talk. You can
talk, you can complain, but it's not going to help you get out earlier.
Right. I wouldn't want to be sent in a place where no one spoke English.
Well, you could help you learn the native language. There, right?
Better, yeah. That would be, my wife would be very happy if I learned a lot more Chinese.
Let me bring up another interesting suggestion or point. Foreigners, I've also talked with foreigners who've been the victim of crime here.
Oh, yeah.
And
rare, though.
Rare, but it does happen. And although very often people don't take my suggestion seriously because it involves spending money. But I like to emphasize that if you are a victim of a crime, you should also have a lawyer, depending on what the crime is. But having your own lawyer will make sure that your rights are protected. And again, if you're a foreigner, regardless of whether or not you speak Mandarin, you could call up the prosecutor and ask, what's the progress of my case? But it's more effective when a lawyer calls up the prosecutor, because then they know you're serious.
Right.
And that you're a victim who has suffered harm, and you've engaged a lawyer. Very often, victims might also be seeking compensation through civil action as well.
So you have civil and criminal.
So you have a lawyer, they're going to help you with the criminal and the civil. But if somebody has crashed into your car, your scooter, for example, and you're looking at both criminal and civil damages or other types of situations, I strongly recommend foreigners who've been the victim of a crime of any sort, they should have their own lawyer. I know it's going to cost money, but I think it's the most prudent course of action rather than trying to deal with the prosecutor on your own.
Now, the foreigners that get in trouble, they're largely English teachers, or are they actually older and more mature?
To tell you the truth, John, it's the range. So to be fair to English teachers, no, not all the foreigners that I come in contact with who've been accused of a crime are English teachers. Some of them are white-collar professionals.
Really?
Including the bar fight ones.
yeah. Something they would never do back home.
I don't know about that, but...
Well, it's the penalties of doing that are pretty severe.
People from all walks of life and all nationalities do get in trouble here in Taiwan. So don't ask me which nationality gets in trouble more often.
Not necessarily in nationality, but just age range. English teachers are young.
I've seen plenty of situations with middle-aged people. So everything from early 20s to the 50s.
Wow.
People our age, John.
Don't say how old we are.
Don't say that on the air. I've seen people of all ages, foreigners, I should say, foreigners of all ages, get in legal trouble here.
Right. I once told a friend, explaining why foreigners get in trouble here, is that they live in the U.S. or Britain or whatever, and they get on the airplane, and it's like a time machine. They go back to their 20s. They go back to their youth when they were still young and vigorous, and they land here and they just behave in a way they would never behave back home. There was a sort of weirdness about it.
I'll tell you what, though, that's not going to work with the prosecutors or the judge. Right? It's not going to be a defense.
Yeah. Well, I was 50 when I got on the airplane, and I was 20 when I got off.
Yeah. It's probably going to be a stronger defense to say I don't remember anything because I had too much to drink. So I really don't remember. But saying I'm in the time machine and got to keep in mind when you come to a foreign country, you are a guest.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Oh my
it's
God!
Not your home.
Yes, absolutely.
And don't assume you could get away with doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard this one before, John. A lot of foreigners who drive cars or drive scooters years ago, going back like 20, 25, 30 years ago, they thought they could get away with turning right on red because they'll just fake that they don't understand. So if they get pulled over by the policeman, they'll say, I don't speak Chinese, and the policeman doesn't speak English, so they would let them go. Nowadays, you cannot get away with that. First of all, a lot of younger people, so younger police officers, they will speak some English. And they'll speak enough English to say you ran the red light or you turn right on red. And if they really have a communication problem and the situation warrants it, they're going to call the Foreign Affairs Police.
Right. That's what they were, Foreign Affairs Police. Yeah.
But if you got stopped for a traffic violation, maybe the police officer's English is so-so. But they still might speak enough to give you a ticket. Or they might call the Foreign Affairs Police.
Right.
So it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card anymore.
No, it used to be.
To act like, I don't understand, I don't speak the language. So don't try that one either.
Right. The police, they don't have the Foreign Affairs Police Department anymore. They have the Immigration Office.
No, they still have, Foreign Affairs Police still exist.
Yeah, but they don't do immigration issues,
no,
thank
they don't
God.
do immigration issues.
Because I remember the fear I had when I went to get my visa stamp.
You thought they were going to march you away in shackles?
It was like, wow, this is the Foreign Affairs Police.
Well, that brings up another good point. The penalties, the monetary fine for overstaying has recently been increased. So
has it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't overstay, because if you overstay in Taiwan, and a lot of younger people do this
By accident.
by accident or
oftentimes,
intentionally.
yes.
But if you overstay, they're probably going to fine you, and they're going to put a stamp in your passport that you can't come back to Taiwan for a few years.
Yeah.
So
crazy,
don't do that. Stay on the right side of the law. Don't break the law. Now, the reality is, a lot of younger people, they'll teach English illegally without a work permit.
Right.
And it would be silly of us to believe that people will stop doing that. But we don't condone it. So if you're coming to Taiwan to teach English, get a legal job. Get one that's on the books, not off the books.
Absolutely. Have a college degree and get sponsored by the school and go in and get your ARC.
Get your alien resident certificate.
That allows you to work.
And then after a few years, you can become a permanent resident.
You can become a permanent resident. Yeah, absolutely. It used to be very difficult 25
now
years
it's
ago.
much easier.
Okay. Yeah, she's here. We have another guest waiting in the window, and that can only mean one thing. We're going to do another episode pretty soon. If we have time, how can people reach you?
They can find me on Twitter at Ross Feingold. That's probably, and send me a direct message if they're really in need of legal trouble. I'm sorry, if they're in need of legal help, because they're in legal trouble, I should say.
And you have some other accounts, right?
I'm on Facebook too, at rossfeingold.international.
Right,
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to wrap this up. I'm John Abrams, the host of Fantastic Formosa. Ross Feingold, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Thank you.